Hey guys, welcome back to chapter 17. We're in section 2 tonight. We're looking at the Renaissance spreading out of Italy now to northern Europe. We talked about last time a little bit about Da Vinci and Michelangelo and Raphael and how they inspired this classical culture to come back in a rush through Italy, and how their ideas and their paintings and things come about and bring about this humanist way of looking at the world. Eventually, in this is going to grow out of Italy and it's going to spread into northern Europe. And so the population in northern Europe, remember, decimated by the plague. Remember, a third of Europe is gone because of the plague. And by about 1450, the population is finally starting to return to where it was before. And so the Hundred Years' War brings France and England back to strong power. We have nationalism coming about, and both of these monarchs in Europe, not in Europe, in England and in France, are very strong patrons of the arts. They are people who spend lots of money on the arts, and so King Francis, even from France, he brings Leonardo da Vinci, convinces him to retire to France, and has him do tons of things in his castle for art. Brings about some other artists as well into France, and so the Renaissance definitely spreading into northern Europe. By 1494, northern Italy was invaded, and many of the artists there decide they're not sure if they're going to be able to keep these same ideals if they stay in northern Italy. And so they're going to wind up fleeing to places in northern Europe, especially France and England. This just pushed even more the humanist ideas and spread them throughout northern Europe. Northern humanists were not just painters, were not just writers about what was going on. They delved into the church a little bit more, and they started being critical of the Christian church and the failure to inspire people to live a Christian life. They thought people were selling indulgences, which we'll get into those a little bit more in the next section when we talk about Luther. But indulgences basically meant that rather than having to stop sinning, you could pay a couple extra dollars and you could go ahead and be resolved of the sin that you had by just paying those extra couple dollars. And so obviously rich people had the power to sin more, and so they're looking at things like this and they're saying, hey, the Christian church isn't really telling people to live a very Christian lifestyle. What they're doing is saying, hey, if you've got the money to fund us, you can do whatever you want. And so this spawns a new movement in the North, the Christian humanists. Of particular concern for the Christian humanists was the reform of society. They thought that people should be good. They thought that people should be doing good works. They thought that people should be treated well between each other. The golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, things like this. And so one of the first things they start talking about is education. And education was the absolute key to a better society, was their belief. And so they decided that both boys and girls should be attending school, which is definitely controversial at this time. And so the two guys that you're going to need to know of our Christian humanists are Erasmus and more. Erasmus wrote The Praise of Folly, which definitely poked fun at some of the same people that the Renaissance writers in Italy were writing about and praising. So these would be the merchants, the the heartbroken lovers, the scholars, and even priests. He believed that Christianity was practiced in the heart and not in rituals. And so you didn't have to necessarily go and take communion, or you didn't necessarily have to go and perform these rites in the Catholic Church. He thought that you could pray without the use of a priest or things like that. And he thought that everyone should study the Bible and find the truth for themselves. The second guy you're going to need to know is Thomas More. Thomas More has this idea in a book called Utopia. And Utopia, which has now become known as an ideal place, but actually Utopia is literally translated to mean no place. And the book is about an imaginary land where greed and corruption and war have been weeded out. Betting money on the quiz that you'll have to take for this lecture that Thomas More and Utopia are on there. So make sure that you did listen a little bit there. Utopia is an ideal place today. Around 1550s, 1558, I guess it is, Queen Elizabeth comes along. Queen Elizabeth the First, not the one who's alive today, obviously. So Queen Elizabeth the First, she reigned from 1558 to about 1600. She was definitely a different type of monarch than where we are used to at this time. She was, for a woman, she was very well educated. She spoke many languages. She could read and write in Italian, in English, in French, in Latin, among others. She wrote poetry. She wrote music. She was a strong supporter of English art and English literature, which leads us to our probably most famous writer of all time, possibly, especially of those of the Elizabethan age, was William Shakespeare. Shakespeare himself had just a love for the classics, and he drew a lot of inspiration from them. Remember, when we're talking about the classics, we're thinking back to ancient Rome, to ancient Italy, places like that. And so just look at his works of Romeo and Juliet happened in Italy, and Julius Caesar, straight from history, things like that. His works were special for people because they had a deep human nature to them. They really hit people at the core of who they were, because they seemed like things that could actually happen. Some of his more famous plays included tragedies like Macbeth, Hamlet, Othello, Romeo and Juliet, and some of his comedies. The biggest two probably are Midsummer Night's Dream and The Taming of the Shrew. And The Taming of the Shrew, if you've ever seen the movie 10 Things I Hate About You, it's actually based on The Taming of the Shrew. What's really going to happen, though, that's really going to spread the Renaissance ideas more than anything, more than the invasions of northern Italy, more than the merchants bringing the ideas through the trade routes, is going to be Gutenberg. Gutenberg not necessarily invents, because the Chinese actually invent the printing press, but he improves the process around 1440. The Chinese invented a process for movable type. The problem is there's thousands of different characters in Chinese, and so it wasn't real practical for them. However, just the 26 letters in the alphabet that we are used to made the movable type just an outstanding invention for Europe. His process makes it possible to produce books quickly and cheaply. So that's the second one that's very important. He printed a Bible, which is known today as the Gutenberg Bible, in 1455, which was the first full-sized book printed with movable type. The printing press enables a printer to print hundreds of copies of a single work. What used to take a single person 5 months to produce one book, now that same person could produce 500 books in that same time. And while most of the time the printing press was not used for books, it was wildly popular to produce pamphlets, so smaller things that could then be handed out on the streets. And what would happen then is these ideas would be printed in a pamphlet. Somebody would read the pamphlet, and what they would normally do is hand it to somebody else who would read the pamphlet and hand it to somebody else. And so this chain would happen, and so you may print 500 copies of a pamphlet, and 3,000 people might have read the pamphlet because of this. And so it makes books cheap enough that people could buy them now, but it also makes the spread of ideas much easier. Um, what do you need to know about the kind of the Renaissance in general? Biggest thing is it changed the arts. Art drew on techniques of classical Greece and Rome. We become more natural in the realistic in the ways that we draw, in the way that we sculpt things. The humanist era. Artists were more secular than religious. The writers begin to use the vernacular, which is definitely big. Remember, the vernacular is their native language rather than Latin, and the arts praised individual achievement. What could humans do, and what were humans capable of? It also changed society. Society in that printing changed society by making more information available to the average person, and it made it inexpensive enough for society at large, rather than just be for the higher ups in society. More books prompted a desire for more education, and so more education than these needs more books, and it just kind of steamrolls from there. The Christian humanists attempt to reform society's views about how we should live, and people begin to question political structures, religious practices, and pretty soon we're going to wind up in the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, where these ideas will challenge the very fabric of the culture that these people are living in. And so that's kind of the Renaissance and what we need to know about the Renaissance. Make sure that you take any notes that you need to, and we will go ahead and call it a wrap from there, and we will talk to you guys tomorrow in class. Have a great night. We'll see you then, guys. Thanks.